Greetings, netizens of YouTube. It has come to my attention that there are some misconceptions about what a social justice warrior is. I will provide a couple of conflicting definitions, give my own opinion, speak a little about my decision to call myself SJW 101. Finally, I'm going to briefly talk about the YouTube social justice community and address the recent attacks upon it by the YouTube liberals directly. Since we are talking about a definition of a phrase that is of the internet age and has no precise definition, we are forced to rely on less scientific sources. The first claim reference to a social justice warrior was in November 2009 in a blog named Social Justice Warriors Do Not Engage. Indeed, a blog of the same name exists today. The author, Will Shetterly, evidently used it to promote his book about social justice warriors, which chiefly consists of his online arguments with those he calls SJWs. Shetterly was also involved in Gamergate, a story I won't be covering today. Social justice warrior. A pejorative term for an individual who repeatedly and vehemently engages in arguments on social justice on the internet, often in a shallow and not well thought out way, for the purpose of raising their own persona, reputation. A social justice warrior or SJW does not necessarily strongly believe all that they say, or even care about the groups they are fighting on behalf of. Urban Dictionary. Anybody familiar with the Urban Dictionary will know that although it's a useful tool, its top definitions are voted upon by an invested audience. It seems to me that stating that SJW is a pejorative term from the outset, that is intended to belittle rather than be descriptive, somewhat discredits this definition. Questioning whether an SJW's beliefs are genuine seems at odds with the common conviction encountered online that SJWs are ideologues. However, from this definition, the part about an SJW being somebody who repeatedly and vehemently engages in arguments is worth consideration. Although, again, this is contradicted by the general stereotype that SJWs prefer safe spaces where their views are not challenged. Social justice warrior is a snarl word used to describe those who call out others for perceived social injustice. Very few people self-identify as an SJW except ironically. The term was originally used as a somewhat neutral and usually humorous phrase describing someone who obsesses over social justice, or their own perception of it, to an almost deranged extent. It could also refer to someone who is accused of otherizing and harassing opponents of what they think is social justice and failing to examine their prejudices and underlying beliefs. Rational Wiki. As many of you will know, the Rational Wiki has a progressive bias, so a kinder definition of SJW is expected. Indeed, the definition goes on to unceremoniously slate Gamergate. However, there can be no doubt that SJW is a snarl word. The accusation is meant to discredit somebody expressing a view, and to emotionally rally others into disbelieving what the accused SJW is saying. There is scant evidence online showing that the word was originally used as a neutral or humorous phrase, although no doubt it has been used as both. However, the last part of the description is probably the most accurate description of an SJW in the minds of many online. Wikipedia offers two definitions which use authoritative language and cast the social justice warrior in a more positive light, but barely touches upon any of the complaints made by the opponents of SJWs. I will not address their definitions here, but I will include a link in the low bar for those interested. At first glance, though the social justice warrior seems to be an attempt to discredit social justice, the word warrior appears to be equally relevant. According to some internet sources, it originally derives from the term keyboard warrior, an unpleasant and argumentative stay-at-home ideologue who most of us has had to deal with at some point. This phrase entered the online lexicon some years previously, and the similarity with SJW suggests the warrior word is related. From this perspective, the SJW isn't a specific beast, rather a keyboard warrior that is obsessive and ideological in advocating what they interpret as social justice. Some may be surprised that I'm not going to argue the definition of SJW in the way I did about the concept of social justice. The answer is simple. Social justice is a defined concept supported by academic study which is being distorted through ignorance and misinformation. SJW is of the internet age. It is uncertain who created the expression, nor is there an established definition. Words such as these have multiple meanings. As you will learn, I am something of a traditionalist concerning word usage, but words with no historical definition are quite literally left to the crowd to decide, even if we have our own preferences. The biggest issue I have with the term is the way it is used to demonize, to silence somebody, or to encourage trolls to join battle against the evil SJW. These types of smear tactics are completely at odds with the principles of the opponents of SJWs who claim to support unfettered free speech and open debate. The other problem is the way that SJW and social justice are used interchangeably by enemies of social justice and the ignorant. If you are guilty of doing this through laziness, I do urge you to reconsider or to correct those who are doing so. And so, if I accept that the term SJW is not necessarily a positive one, why then would I call myself SJW 101? Let's assume that the majority of people dismiss the views of an SJW, and I can attest to this fact. I am usually held personally responsible for every rehearsed talking point documented by the anti-feminist YouTube liberals and conservatives. However, there is a sizable minority that understand that what a person says is more important than their preconceived impressions. Those who appreciate there is no such thing as a hive mind and are willing to listen. This is in essence the concept of my channel, an attempt to diffuse some of the hatred and generalizations, to redress some popular misconceptions, and also to show that there is much we have in common with liberals who have been told by their elders that we are extremists and should be treated like lepers. The truth about the SJW/progressive community on YouTube is that it is small in number. That is, despite the insistence of the popular YouTube liberals and their allies on the right, that a so-called social justice agenda is poisoning public life and that SJWs are omnipresent in online communities such as YouTube. This truth is not part of the narrative that the big beasts of the progressive attacking liberal community like to talk about. It would not do to inform their audience that their enemies are a minority both online and in society. In fact, if you look at some of the controversies that the progressive community has been involved in and isolate the main characters concerned, we are usually talking about a YouTube elephant with hundreds of thousands of supporters against a YouTube mouse with support totaling a couple of thousand at most. The monster under the bed turns out to be much smaller than the giant sleeping above it. The other truth about the community is that very few members can be considered as SJWs, as defined above. Hand on heart, until this moment I have never come into contact with that variety of SJW on YouTube, although I have had the pleasure on other platforms such as Twitter and Facebook. In fact, of those I know, nobody is more passionate specifically about the topic of social justice than I am, and yet not a single person has attacked me from the left thus far, even though it would be perfectly legitimate to do so. My message to the YouTube content creating liberals is as follows. You have all the resources, you have thousands of tech-savvy supporters to do your research for you. In many cases, you have much more time to collate information and to create videos to prepare your talking points. You choose to loosely align yourselves with others on the political right, all in the spirit of non-partisanship, or in some cases through mutual financial motivation, even though you claim left-of-centre sympathies. And yet you constantly target us as the enemy. a small community of progressives and their allies. Does that make you feel bold? Is this what your enemy looks like? I can't claim to represent the YouTube progressive community and their friends, but I believe I am speaking in their name when I say that we promise you that for as long as you misinform and mislead your audience by omission or through ignorance, we will be there to respond and to correct you. You can mock, kick us when we are down, use new hate words to discredit us, and you may have a much larger audience, but subject by subject, topic by topic, we will continue to give the side of the story that you failed to provide in your quest to confirm your own narrative.